This is a production of Cornell University.
Good. I hope that you're all having a wonderful, amazing Wednesday. It's been rainy here in Geneva, New York. If it continues like this, we'll soon forget what the sun looks like. I'm Lucia Viñale. I'm a third-year PhD candidate in the plant breeding and genetics in the Larry Smart Lab at Cornell University. Before I introduce our next speaker, I want to mention that this is our last webinar of the 2025 series. It's been great. We've had a wonderful panel of speakers, but don't desperate. We are planning to continue organizing our annual webinar. And next year's organizer is Mailing Murdoch, who is also a PhD candidate in our lab. So I have no doubt that she's going to do a great job. Today's speaker is Kendra Meier. She has been the Chief Operating Officer of HPS Food and Ingredients since 2020 and has been with HPS and Harvest Genetic International since 2015, holding various positions within the company since she joined. Today, she's responsible for overseeing all areas of the supply chain, including hemp seed and faba bean production and procurement, grain cleaning and ingredient processing, and finished ingredient logistics and sales. Just prior to starting HPS, Kendra completed her master's in plant sciences at the U of S in 2016. She also previously worked at Corteva Agriscience in their seed production division, as well as previous roles with Environment Canada. Her topic today is hemp products as food ingredients and supply chains. And remember that we've recorded all the webinars. We're recording this one, and the previous ones are already in our School of Integrative Plant Sciences SIPS YouTube channel. So without further ado, Kendra, the stage is all yours.
First test. Okay, well, thank you for having me today. Yes, as I said, my name is Kendra Meier and the COO of HPS Food and Ingredients. And yeah, I would just like to kind of give a presentation a bit more of like the supply chain through my eyes, as I kind of wear many hats in the operation, all the way from the farmer side of it to the final sales and food ingredients. So first, I just want to give a brief introduction of who we are at HPS. We are a company that really focuses just on the grain production of the hemp plant and utilizing it for food ingredients. Our main goal is to make this a main hemp food part of the mainstream diet globally. We really try to focus on quality, and the whole idea is that we're going to create the best tasting, the highest quality, innovative hemp seed food products, so that when you get your first time customers, they'll become experienced customers and the word will spread, and then they'll keep coming back for more. And ultimately, like, we want to see hemp food ingredients, especially the hemp seed protein, to be treated like the next pea and soy protein out there. And I just want to give you kind of a brief history of HPS Food and Ingredients. It goes back way back in history when it became legal in 1998 in Canada. So my father is Gary Meier, and he's on the far right there. And in 1999, I would have been about 10 years old at the time. He was contracted to do some plot work for a hemp seed company that brought in some Ukrainian genetics. And because he was one of the few select seed growers for oil seeds in Saskatchewan at the time. And so I remember being out there roguing the fields and picking out the male plants. And these are all monoecious varieties that felt like they were 20 feet tall. So it was quite an interesting task to be a part of, even at that age. But when it came at the end after we harvested and the company was no longer there to collect the seed or to pay for the seed. So essentially we got the crop certificates, and that is kind of the first steps of how we got involved into hemp genetics. And so Gary, he called on one of his best friends, Dr. Albert Vandenberg, who is the plant breeder of the lentils at the University of Saskatchewan, saying, hey, I got this new side project. Do you want to be a part of it? and kind of twisted his arm a little bit. But then in 2021, they formed Hemp Genetics International, which currently has 6 commercial varieties available out there right now in the marketplace. I was always involved with like the hemp seed side of the business on the genetics with the roguing and just helping with growing and seed production. But in 2014, I took on a bigger role where we formed Hemp Production Services, which was essentially to be more of an agronomy support group and supply chain management. And we essentially needed to create an outlet from our seed program because you're always producing more seed than you're actually going to sell, just to help mitigate the risks in seed production. So in 2020, we then rebranded Hemp Production Services to HPS Food Ingredients. And this is mainly because we started including other ingredients in our portfolio, specifically faba beans, which we were then breeding with Hemp Genetics International. And then in 2021, Hemp Genetics International also had a little bit of a rebrand to Harvest Genetics International because it essentially just started focusing on faba beans, and our hemp portfolio moved in with verb seeds, which we are now working on some exciting genetics with them, including hybrids. And I'll talk about that a little bit more in the presentation. So yeah, I wanted to focus more on actually talking about the supply chain in the hemp industry, particularly in the hemp food ingredients industry, because that's what I do spend a lot of my time on. And I truly believe there's 5 components that really make the whole industry and the supply chain successful. And a big part of that is obviously market demand, because we need people to want this products, because that's one of the main reasons we need to do that to grow it. But we also need very strong farming partnerships, and that's either with growers in your region, growers across the country, even just other groups. Like we work with other groups in the States that are also producing grain, and because you also want to diversify that grower base. Processing and traceability is always very important in the supply chain, as well as part of the story when you're talking to your customers about that. And with that, though, to get good ingredients, you need really good genetics as well. And I'll touch base in terms of what we like to talk about in terms of our preferred traits, but also how the genetics is also going to transform the industry in general. And the other thing is ingredient innovation. For a long time, hemp has been based on hemp parts, like your cold pressed oils, your proteins of 50 to 33%. But now it's time to push the envelope a little bit, because food manufacturers are wanting some different products. Everybody wants higher protein and more functionality. So with supply chain, especially of specialty ingredients like hemp, there's always challenges. The big one, there's always a higher risk to the growers. I say hemp is an easy plant to grow, but it's really the harvest and post-harvest management that takes a lot more effort from the growers to make sure that it's a quality product that's good for processing. And it's also just in general a little bit higher wear and tear on their equipment as well. So that's something you always got to manufacture in when you're working with growers, because they're going to expect you to get paid for that. I do believe there's also a higher risk to contractors like ourselves. You technically got to predict what that price is going to be, hope the markets don't really fluctuate, because you're typically locked into full production contracts with these growers, and you want to move it out of their bins each year because you don't want them to get sitting on it, and that just puts a bad taste in the industry's mouth in general. And then also like changes in the market, especially in small crops like hemp. Like small changes are very magnified, and I can really relate back to back in 2015, 16, 17. There was some large Asian markets that were taking a lot of hemp, and acres were going in the grounds to produce for those markets, but it was almost instantly overnight that market shut down because there was a report that came out that said, hey, flax from Canada has high cadmium levels, ... hemp might as well. And that change really like stopped the supply chain for a good 6 months plus more. And it took a lot of pivoting and reevaluating how to get more hemp into other people's hands. And the other challenge too is like hemp is a niche market right now. It's a slow uptake, and a lot of education has been needed. But I believe as an industry, we are on the right path with that. And we've been working well with food manufacturers, showing how they can incorporate in their ingredients. But I'd say the biggest challenge of all is just right now, hemp is a very high price and the cost to produce it, the ingredients, is exceptionally higher. And you'll see this slide one more time in this presentation, but I just wanted to bring it up right now just to kind of give some insight. So all these numbers are basically showing like what's the efficiency to produce 1 pound of protein and fat cost-wise. And these are all in Canadian dollars, so I just want to preface with that. But essentially, you can see that hemp is almost double, if not more, than a lot of the other major players in the industry. And what we need to figure out and work on is how can we get this $1.32 Canadian per pound of what protein or fat would cost per acre down to the similar of the canola model at the 36 cents. But with challenges, we do this because there's always opportunities. And the reality is that there's market trends that are starting to favor hemp ingredients. Our education is paying off. There's a lot more food manufacturing adaptation going on where they're looking to incorporate a percentage of the product versus, just putting hemp hearts in a bag on the shelf. There's a lot of work on some new value added ingredients. And I use the term value added in the sense that your typical hemp ingredient like hemp hearts is now being further processed into a hemp isolate. And there's also some cost coming down too, and that really comes down to the farmer production models as well as the genetics. So I just want to give you a quick overview of what we do at HPS in terms of our production and sales cycle. And it's kind of like a chicken and an egg situation every year, but it's also, you got to work at the same time together too. So like January to springtime, it's really the production side of the company. We're figuring out our acres and talking to the sales team, trying to figure out where they're going to be and what their projections are. I would say one of the biggest challenges is that a lot of our clients love to tell us what they need by October. And as you know, when you're trying to plant for that, that's not always a challenge when you got to plant this in May. But so it has to work on, you have to work with the sales team, you got to work with the customers and with the farmers and just keep those communication lines really open. But yeah, it's a constant year-round cycle that just does not end. So just wanted to start now touching base on the components to the supply chain success. And one is the market demand. And the reality is that plant-based foods are not going away. They are still predicting that $162 billion in plant-based markets by 2020 or 2030. Yes, there's a few setbacks with the meat alternatives like your Beyond Meats out there. However, right now, if you go to any of these food shows in the States, everywhere you see things are plant-based and everything is looking for higher protein. And they're also looking for nutritional claims like high omegas, a source of omegas. And we see that just in the marketplace too. There's, a lot of groups still promoting a lot of hemp products. They're starting to be used in butters. They're starting to be used in salad toppers. And one of the big exciting spaces, I believe, is the dairy alternative space. And there's hemp milks out there right now, and there's going to be more alternatives, which I'll touch base on. And the reason for this market driving is because people are seeing hemp seed protein as a superior protein. Contains all the 9 essential amino acids. It's rich in magnesium, and it also they can start to make omega claims on it, which is great for skin health, anti-inflammatory, and also positive for cardiovascular health as well too. And one of the other big parts for the protein component of hemp is a lot of functionality testings have been done, and they're finding that hemp is one of the most digestible plant-based proteins out there right now. The other component of hemp is the hemp seed oil, and there's many health claims that can be made from this, which I think we need to work on an industry in terms of formalizing those health claims to be put on the packages. It's naturally high in vitamin E, which is really good for antioxidants. It's a great GLA source, and it's low in saturated fats and free of trans fats. Sorry. But one of the biggest things too is it's just a nice flavor profile, and it accommodates a lot of food products as well. And the hemp oil definitely contains one of the highest ratios of essential omega-3 fatty acids to other fatty acids, which is a great component to have when you're promoting these products to your clients, because they're always going to ask, how does this compare to your other oils out there? So we'll be moving on then now to talking a bit more of the processing and traceability of our company here. And as you can see, like, we know where everything comes from all the way from the farm to the final packaging. And we also do quality control steps on every step as well too. And this is no different if we're bringing in grain from our US partners or overseas partners. Like, we will be testing every component of it. And then if our client says, hey, where does this come from? How is this manufactured? We're able to tell them every step about that. So here at HPS, we do a lot of your typical hemp seed ingredients that are quite common that everybody knows about, such as your hulled hemp seed, your hemp seed oils, and then creating your 50%, 33, and 23%. And so a lot of that's done just with mechanical equipment, your dehulling equipment, your cold pressing equipment, and milling. It's really, there's nothing really scientific to it in terms of how most of hemp ingredients have been made. But as I said, there's a lot bigger push for more innovative products and how can we maximize the functionality of these ingredients. And that has to be done with some further value added processing. And so a few of the options, things that we're doing now, and I'll touch base a bit more specifics on these ingredients, is so now you can take the hulled hemp seed component and then push it off into the hemp cream base, which is a great product for your dairy alternatives. And then your byproduct of that is an 80% protein, and then has great attributes for your ready to make meal replacements and drinks. But then the other things we're working on too is especially like your 23% protein, which has been a great fiber component, but it just hasn't been a big money maker. But then now we're working with groups that are able to process it a bit further to make a 95% protein extract out of it. And so, yeah, to create these more functional ingredients, you can't just really use the mechanical traditional ways anymore. You have to most likely look at some dry fractionation and wet fractionation processing. So a big component of our supply chains too is the farmers. And I come from a farming background, and so we always wanted to have our growers with us throughout the whole process and understand how we can maximize hemp on a per acre basis in terms of return for the growers. Our growers, like, they're all leading on the leading edge of sustainability, technology, conservation. They understand, like, you need good soils, you need good crop rotations to have successful crops, not just with hemp. And growing hemp is great, but you also got to figure out how it grows well in rotations with growers with already what they have, as well as the equipment they already have too. So a lot of our growers, like, they do minimum 3-year rotations. Most of them actually do 4 to 5. We've tried to match it behind like a pulse crop, so you're getting that bonus added nitrogen fixation that's going into the hemp, because the reality is hemp is a very heavy fertility user, and so we need to help growers plan for that as well in their rotations. I would say majority of our growers are all no-till, so there's very low disturbance to the soil. And we do have a bunch that also use irrigation, and which is great because hemp, I mean, it loves moisture and it loves the heat, so it does quite well in those southern regions. On the organic side, we use a lot of our farmers will use cover crops to help with the fertility, and they're building up that soil with manure crops. And for example, that's where our faba bean breeding kind of comes in too, is kind of to help the organic growers to get more nitrogen in their soils. And so with the nitrogen added from pulses that help the hemp, they're able to get better establishment and then suppress weeds. But they also are starting to use a lot of advanced weed control systems too in their operations. And I've seen some very cool equipment with cameras and little flames and rotary hose. And it's really amazing to see how far organic farming practices has come even in the last 10 years. So our grower base, like it's heavily focused in Canada, but we are expanding into the US as well and working with companies down there that are also contracting with farmers, and and not just the US, even internationally as well. Now that more and more of the world is getting some access to better, consistent genetics, their acres are becoming more predictable and stable too, and it's allowing companies, not just us but others, to have reliable source year round of grain too, and not just from North America, but even South America too, like in contra season. So with that expansion, it's really going to help the hemp industry be a bigger global player around the world. So, and with our growers too, like we have a few agronomists on staff that work very closely with them. We customize their agronomy support a lot with field selection, and we do several on-field visits throughout the year. But the biggest help that we give the growers is really at the harvest and post-harvest management, because timing of harvest is very critical. So they're not harvesting something that's too mature that makes their equipment um, a lot more difficult to harvest it. But also we try to make sure that we're having the best grain that's stored in the bins and making sure it's dried to a point where it's stable. Because when it comes down to it, you can tell the growers how great hemp is for their rotations and everything, but they're here to make money at the bottom line as well. And our biggest competitor for acres up here in Canada is canola. And so we work a lot with on a cost analysis model like this with the growers to kind of show what hemp can do for them. Um, but that's the reality, is that we have to be competitive with canola. Canola has a bit of a few advantages in terms of, I mean, it's a very large market, so it's very easy to market for growers. If there is a change in the market, I mean, it'll affect the price a little bit, but not a lot. But there's always an outlet for their canola, and they're rarely sitting on it if they don't want to. And so you do have to pay a little bit more to the hemp growers to kind of help mitigate that risk as well. Um, but if we can make it easier to harvest and have a strong market for it, I believe we'll be able to increase the acres exceptionally as well amongst the hemp growers to be similar to canola. But a lot of that comes down to genetics. And so HPS, like we work with a lot of HGI genetics. Like I said, there were 6 that have been on the commercial markets for many years. And our preferred traits are, we're always looking for that larger seed size, which is great for us at the processing efficiency, but it's also great for the farmers too, because they are not getting as high dockage when it comes to the cleaning aspect of it. So instead of getting a cleaning dockage of 15 to 20%, you're kind of more in that 10% range. It's high, a lot of these varieties are high yield, and really that's just what we need for the farmers and trying to bring our cost of the grain down as well too. The flavors are nutty and neutral, so they're great for the ingredients. And a lot of them they're considered to be one of the easier varieties to harvest as well too. And again, that goes down to the grower aspect, where you want to keep them happy, and if they don't have good harvest experiences, they will remember that for at least a while until they come back again. But the other big thing is, like, we're always looking for more tools for our growers, and especially on the conventional side, we're looking for some herbicide options just to kind of help adapt to some of that weed control that growers want in their rotations. Because if they grow a pretty clean rotation and all of a sudden they get hemp with no weed control options, and it just starts to take over their fields again, they're not going to like that for their future rotations with their other crops. So more tools for that is always appreciated. So as I mentioned, the genetics program is now with Verve Seeds. They've taken over that, and they've been working on a few new open pollinated varieties. One that was just released last year was called Rack. It's a very large seed variety. It's very high yielding, and it's great to process. And so we've been very happy with that one. But what we're most excited about, what Verve is going to be doing, is hybrids. So I'm sure there's been a few talks already about, or you've probably been privy to some hybrid talks as well about hemp, but essentially, like, what is hybrid hemp? The first thing is, it's not a GMO. So it's considered a conventional method that can be used. It's really no different than the other genetics that we're using now. Other than that, the yields are going to be exceptionally a lot higher. And as you can see, just kind of, it's based off the corn hybrid model, from my understanding, and essentially you kind of take the best of one parent and the best of another parent, and the idea is when you combine those two, you get a super progeny, like you see in this photo here of the corn. And so there's been a lot of efforts going on parent selections by Verve Seeds the last few years to kind of create some of these hybrid hemp plants that will ultimately increase the yield for the growers. And based on the last year's field data, there has been some promising results on it. We're already seeing some percent checks, like 187% over the mean checks, and which is fantastic. And these are even on dry land conditions too, like not even irrigated. And I want to kind of show that excitement through what we saw on the Canadian canola side of things back in the late 90s. So it was in 1989, I believe, the first hybrid came to Canada, but 91 was one of the first popular hybrids. It was called Hyola 401. And so as you can see here, like as the bushels per acre started to increase due to those hybrids, so did the acres as well. And essentially that's because you were creating a lower cost ingredient, and which a lot of demand was creating for it too. So if you can have that low put ingredient that's beneficial to the food manufacturing space, like there will be demand for that. And again, I've showed you this slide once already, but I wanted to bring it up again. And so as what we see hemp today, and this is an average of 1,000 pounds an acre, where that cost of producing 1 pound is $1.32 Canadian. With the hybrids models, when you essentially are doubling the yields of the protein and the fats produced per acre, your efficiency cost decreases down to 33 cents a pound. And now you're on par with your major other players in the marketplace, such as soybean, as well as canola. And so, yeah, that's great. And I believe that it's going to help expand the hemp industry even more. However, I don't think it's going to expand the hemp industry just based on your typical hemp hearts and 50% in cold pressed oils. What you really need is to push that ingredient envelope to create more functionality. And I will preface this, I am not a food scientist. We work with food development centers in the States as in Canada to really help us to create formulations. And so these are just some of the information that we've been working on with those groups to show how to our clients, like the food manufacturers, how they can incorporate into their formulations and what's the best way to use them as well too. And so we have a really just kind of a quick look at this chart right here. And so we say like, hey, if you're looking for flow and dispersion, like these are the type of ingredients that you should be looking at in our portfolio, which would be a 65% hulled hemp protein powder, as well as our 85%. And so a lot of this work and is a really great baseline just to help share with those food manufacturers in terms of how they can utilize it. Because instead of just showing them the ingredient and letting them figure it out, we're kind of giving them a few steps ahead saying, look, we've created some concepts, here they are, this is how it's going to work with your formulations. So just to kind of get into a few of our newer ingredients that we've been working on. So hulled hemp seed powder is 65%. So this is still a mechanically milled process. It's made from our hemp hearts after they've been defatted. It's high protein and it has a nice mild nutty flavor. It's very similar to hemp hearts, but it also has a pretty decent high PDCAAS score of digestibility. And so one of the few markets that we've been targeting this is a lot of the bar markets have taken interest, especially the cold bar markets. And this is just a concept that was created by one of the food labs, as you can see, how you can like incorporate it into your final product. So like this ingredient, you can easily use up to 65 or 25% of the inclusion rate. And then, yeah, and just break it down a bit more too in terms of how it can be incorporated and how it's an alternative to your other products out there, like your rice and pea proteins. Another exciting ingredient that we've been working on with was with our partners from Burcon Nutrisciences. And so we did a PIC project, which is a Protein Industries Canada project. So they've been funding projects that will allow you to create value added in certain aspects of your processing. So the 95% hemp isolate basically came from, look, usually there's companies with mountains of 25% protein powder in warehouses, because up here in Canada, like, we don't have the same ease into feed markets quite yet, which the US is getting much further ahead of us on, which is great. So we need to kind of create other food alternative streams for this ingredient. And so Burcon was able to take the 23% and then do a wet extraction to create this 95% isolate. And some of the best things about it is that it is low viscosity, it's water binding, and it foams quite well. So it's a really good product in several applications, but a lot of interest is getting more on the extruded product. So your puffs that for your snack industry. And so we've also been working on an 80% protein isolate too, and this also comes from a wet extraction process, but this comes from the hemp parts itself. And it has similar attributes as the 95, but I would say it's a little bit more of a nuttier flavor. It's a bit more neutral of a color in general. And it's very comparable to how pea isolate would react in formulations. So it's also really good for ready to drink beverages. We have a few clients using it, dairy alternatives as well, and even extrusion products, but also some are using it as a binding agent too in emulsifications, like such in salad dressings. One of the most excited products that we're working on right now that I'm excited about is what we call our hemp cream base. And so this is essentially the byproduct from our 80% isolate that we created. And it's a really great product in terms of what it can be used in. And then one of the nicest things about the hemp cream base, especially for dairy applications, like, it has a very similar mouthfeel to dairy, like milk or cream cheeses or yogurts, because it already is so oily, but it's rich in omegas. So you can also make your omega claims on it as well. And so one of the concepts that we started to create is just like a hemp creamer alternative. So you have a lot of oat-based milks, almond-based milks. Well, hemp cream would be a great option too. And this one is actually added into the hemp or an oat milk base instead of using like another type of oil, a seed oil added to it. But it keeps it very creamy just because of the hemp oil added into it. And then plus these groups can now start making omega claims onto their packaging. We've also been playing around a few other ones, including hemp cream frozen dessert, as well as some hemp cream salad dressings. Again, there's a lot of positive feedback, and then we've made these concepts, as we said, and we can just share them to these types of manufacturers, and they can easily kind of plug and play, which is great. And to continue on with the dairy alternatives, like, it's a great foundation for emulsifications. A lot of times egg yolk is used as emulsifier, but the hemp paste that you can make from the hemp parts, or the 65%, is looking like a great alternative replacement. And plus you still get those omega claims that you can use in your formulations. So yeah, I just wanted to kind of just touch base on a few conclusions, but essentially there's always going to be challenges when establishing new supply chains, like in specialty crops like hemp. A lot of it's just kind of market adaptation, education, but I believe we're getting through a lot of those barriers together. We need to continue to work together as an industry. I know it's easy to hold your cards close to your chest, but I know we're finding, like, the more that we're partnering with groups, especially in the US and overseas, like the more impact that we're making in the hemp industry, and just the more collaborations and just products being made from those collaborations too is really game changing. There's still, I believe, so many opportunities. And with the plant-based protein industry continually growing, I think hemp has a very big space, a big role to play in that industry. There's a lot of interest, there's a lot of functionality attributes that a lot of food processors love about it. And I think it's just going to continue to grow, but that market adaptation doesn't happen overnight. And so, I mean, we've been kind of doing the education process for the last 5 years, and a lot of these ingredients kind of just been popping up that we presented to our clients in the last year and a bit. So it takes time, but we're definitely making some headway. So to continue on to create this industry and to make it resilient and continue forward, we got to continue to push that education, show the functionality, show the attributes that hemp can have all the way through the pipeline. Like you got to show it at the farming level, you got to show it at the food manufacturing level, because they all got to connect the dots for it to work. The big thing is the price competitiveness, and I believe that's the bottleneck for the industry right now. And I really believe that happens at the grain input price. And so if we can get hybrids and we can get 2x, 3x yields out in the field and bring that cost of production down so you're similar to your canolas and peas and soys, like I truly believe that this protein would be superior to any of those in the food marketplace, and it would be a no-brainer for a lot of those industries to switch over. And that's because of all the functionality that we're showing them right now at this stage of the industry. And another thing I think the hemp industry, both Canada and the US, if not the world, is we need to start working together and creating these health claims and putting the effort into the research that's required to do that. A lot of other groups, like your egg groups, your oat groups, like a lot of the other major food groups out there, like they have functional claims and health claims that they're using to promote heart health, for example, and they are able to put that on their packaging. So if we can do the work to get that done and put those claims on our packaging, then I think that's going to also really help the ingredient space to go forward. So yeah, thank you for listening today and having me for the last of the webinar series. So, and I hope everybody, if you're out in the field, that you have a good planting season.
Thank you so much. We loved your talk.
Okay.
We already have questions for you, but I'm going to ask the first one.
Sure.
So you talked about having weed control for hemp, and we're used to hearing people complaining that we don't have herbicides to control the weeds that will compete with hemp, but not to control hemp. So that was different, like a different take, if I understood correctly.
Yeah, sorry. I mean, like the weed control, like to, yeah, I probably just misspoke. I was talking about just like weeds when growing with hemp. Like we're looking for more tools to control the weeds during the hemp production. So I know in the US, there's not many registered herbicides yet for hemp. So having those registrations will definitely help growers then control the weeds, because they don't want to grow, all their crops with weed control options. And then all of a sudden when we move to hemp, then the weeds kind of take over again, because then they're kind of starting at zero again when they're going back, moving out of the hemp in the rotation.
Yeah, that is definitely a problem.
Yeah.
So I might read the first one. I don't know if you can see the questions if you click on the Q&A, but I'll ask the first one. Tyler is asking, do you find it difficult to store hemp seeds with high polyunsaturated fats?
Yes and no. I would say mostly no. Like it's really, we really focus on the moisture point of the grain. And if you can get it dried down to an 8 to 9% moisture point, the grain is quite stable actually in the bins. And obviously in Canada, we have a bit different conditions where, I mean, we have winter for 8 months of the year, it feels like. So that definitely helps as a bit of a storage solution for us, because a lot of our hemp has kind of moved out usually before the new crop year. So if it is in some of the warmer months, it's not there for long. But getting it down to that proper moisture point is the big key right after harvest.
Awesome. So Laura is asking, how does one go about developing oil-based product lines here in the US?
Sorry, what was that?
It's our second question. But I understood that you're not actually breeding the lines, right?
No, that would be, Verb Seeds. Like they are the ones that are focusing on like the genetic components. And yes, like there has been start with looking for different oil profiles and proteins. They always ask us and other food companies, what do we want to see? But my first wish list is always yield right now, to be honest, because once we get that like that price point lower, I believe that's really going to help our ingredient costs at this point. And then I think once we get that yield up high, I'd be ready to start looking at the other specific profiles or protein concentrations.
So Luis is asking, in your hemp processing flowchart, you have toasting as one of the steps. Mm-hmm. Why do you toast the whole hemp seed?
So we started toasting the whole hemp seed actually for a couple of our Asian markets, and that's essentially because they have pretty strict germination rules. They think that they think hemp hearts can germinate essentially, and I mean there could be the odd endosperm like forming, but it would never like grow into an actual plant. So it's essentially just a step that we do for them for those. But in doing that though, we've also found that when you toast the hemp and then dehull it, actually it's like a peanut in that sense. Like you get a little bit of a different profile. So there is some groups that do like kind of that roasted nutty flavor that comes from it.
Does it require like an extra step in equipment that you need?
Yes.
To incorporate
So there'd be some sort of like toasting equipment. There's many different types that can be used, but yes, a heat step is required.
So another question from Luis. What is your target seed size for an optimal processing?
Good question. I mean, the rack variety, I believe, is like closer to that 18 grams 1,000 kernel weight. And so kind of anything between that, I would say 14 to 18 is kind of like ideal. I mean, there is like other varieties that are much smaller than that. Like finola, like we still use finola a lot as well too, because some of our growers prefer it, some of its growing attributes. But I mean, sometimes the cleaning, but then you kind of lose a little bit on the cleaning with dockage because it's a smaller seed size, and then you don't usually get as efficient yields, but the yields are still okay. There's some other varieties. The seed's so small that you lose a lot even in the dehulling equipment. So we try to avoid that or just use that for a crushing line.
So I know Luis, and he likes big seeds, closer to 25 or even higher.
Oh wow! Like that's yeah.
What even is asking, what kind of analytical methods do you use to quantify your critical quality attributes? For example, protein, fat, particle size, etc.
Sorry, that would be a question above my pay grade. That would have to be more for the QA and the food people in our group. So I'd have to defer to them.
Good. Another question is, are you able to maintain the CBD molecule in the hemp creamer?
I would say it's very similar to like how it would be in the oil. Like it's a very small amount into it. It's very low amounts to even, you couldn't even make a claim that it's even there, I would say.
Yeah, and I mean, if I understand correctly, you don't want, really, it's not the idea of the creamer to have CBD?
No. Yeah. We try to keep a lot of, obviously, the THC and the CBD like at quite low levels at all times. And really that's just to kind of satisfy the food industry, because they don't want anything that sounds scary essentially in their products. So
yeah, and we'll have a legal issues later, maybe you could add it later if you wanted.
Yeah, and then but that's like a whole nother regulation thing that I can't even comment on.
So another question is, are you reaching out to dietitians with education on the value of hemp food to advise patients and explain why don't get high on hemp or seed oil?
Yeah, I mean, we're like reaching out kind of just generally to everybody. Like we do a lot of great education at, especially a lot of the food shows that we go to. Like we go to all the Supply Side West and to the expos and to IFTs, and that's where you meet a lot of even the food formulators as well, and a lot of dietitians and people from the health food industry. So there is a lot of education that goes on there, and I mean, when we started going to these food shows back in like 2014, like, yeah, I would say 60+% of the people, they're like, oh, am I going to get high off of this? And I would say that's, those questions are virtually zero now. And now they're starting to ask more about the omega claims, the protein functionalities, which is, it's a great change because it kind of shows you how the end industry has evolved.
Yeah, that's good to hear. Lillian is asking, are you working with any farmers in Georgia or on South Carolina in the US?
We haven't yet. I know some of the genetics from Verve seeds, I think, are starting to get played around with down there. So it's, but no, we have not been working there yet. Most right now, a lot of the northern states is kind of where we've been working with growers, and that's a little bit too, just with the ability to move it across border more efficiently at this point.
Sid's question is, can you point out one or two nutritional factors which makes hemp protein superior nutritionally as compared to other proteins in the market, plant-based or dairy? Also, how does it compare from a cost per ton perspective?
The cost is high still. Like it's, and that kind of just plays in this roles of this slide here. Like the cost of our proteins are not pretty close to double at this point. So that's why the inclusion rates are quite low, because a lot of people like the attributes of it, but because, you know, it's when pea protein is a few dollars a pound and hemp protein's closer to that $6 to $8 a pound, like, yeah, they're not going to completely flip out all of it. But one point though, I'd like to make is that with formulations though, when you combine hemp and a pulse protein, you are getting closer to those PDCAS scores of 1, which is what a lot of the food manufacturers want to have on their plant-based protein packaging, because that essentially means you get all the essential amino acids and the digestibility is good as well. But yeah, in terms of the protein of the hemp, I'll just bring back this slide here. That's not it. There. Stop moving. There. Yeah. So one thing is probably one of the closest things is like it has essentially like a very complete amino acid profile. Like that's one of the main things a lot of groups like about it. It is a little bit low on the lysine, but that's when you combine it with your pulse ingredients, and that kind of helps bring up that lysine component too. The other thing is that like it's very high in arginine, which is great for cardiovascular health systems.
It sounds healthy.
Yeah.
So Femi is asking, do you check the effect of toasting on A and F anti-nutrient factors, specifically trypsin inhibitor?
I would have to consult our QA about that. But all I know is like we do all the necessary testing and all the food specs for their clients, and so I assume it's all within check. Obviously, when you do toast it, like the shelf life is a bit shortened on it compared to if it was just a raw product. So yeah, I believe there is some effect on that for sure, but to the extent I wouldn't be able to tell you off the top of my head.
So what are your thoughts on GMO hemp?
My thoughts on GMO hemp. I believe GMOs are a tool in the toolbox. and they're not meant for everything, but they do work in some situations. I do believe right now the hybrid model is more appropriate for hemp, and if we can move with that to see how just doubling the yield, that's great. But I don't think anybody should disregard GMOs as a negative component in the breeding world, because like it really is just another tool that farmers can utilize, and it does help bring down some herbicides or insecticide uses out in fields. So if it can benefit the ecosystems in general, I think they're a great tool to have.
Um, so I think we've covered all the questions. Yeah. Well, thank you all for connecting. Thank you, Kendra, so much for your talk. We learned a lot.
Okay.
And we're saying goodbye for the 2025 series. So hopefully you all enjoyed it, and see you next year.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
This has been a production of Cornell University, on the web at cornell.edu.